أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. My good friends, it's good to be with you. Assalamu alaikum. Let's look again at this amazing and important chapter 1 of the Holy Qur'an. The first 7 verses referred to by the name Al-Fatiha, which translates to the key or the opening or the means of opening. And that is indeed what it is. It's a means of accessing the Quran. Now, in my previous discussion with you, I mentioned to you that the Surah Fatiha resembles a national anthem or a pledge of allegiance. And that was, and it's, if you studied it, it really does. But I think the amazing second idea that emanates from this important few verses is that it encapsulates, it summarizes the worldview of the Quran. And let me go with you through some of these verses and you'll see what I mean when I say it encapsulates the worldview of Islam. Now, the worldview of Islam, forget about what these priests and all these pretenders, self-appointed experts tell you about the Quran. The Quran is a book that amounts to a few very simple principles that I can quickly think of. The first is that there is an existence, there is a divine, supreme intelligence, existence, mind over the universe that transcends time and space, that is eternal, that is undying, and that is in control of the universe. And that eternal being we refer to by many names. You know, the Greeks used to call him Zeus, the Vikings called him Odin maybe, and the Muslims the Arabs use the word Allah. The Jewish people or the ancient Hebrewic people called him Jehovah. Christians or North Europeans have adopted the name God, which Persians always comes from the Persian Khodaya. And so that being, the name is not important. The fact that there is a life, a being and intelligence that is eternal, that is limitless in its powers and in its ability, that is the core teaching of the Quran. Now, many religions, the Vikings, the Germanic people, the Greeks, the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, they've all attributed certain attributes to this supreme being, to this existence, to this force, to this power, this controlling essence over the entire cosmos. They've attributed different characteristics and attributes to this being. So what the Quran does is it first of all lays down the reality that there is such a being. And that comes out in the very, very first line of the Holy Quran. In the very, very first line it states, Alhamdulillah. So in the very first line, in the introductory sentence of the Quran, when you open the book and you look at the first sentence, it introduces this being to us and it juxtaposes our relationship to this being, and it states, all praise, acknowledgement, salutation, glory, recognition to the one deity, because that is what Allah means. Allah means the one deity. And so the first line acknowledges the existence and impels and commands the reader to pay homage to that supreme and divine intelligence and existence that is there. But then in the next move, it goes on to clarify and to lay down the real characteristics of this being, because we are miseducated by people to teach us that this being has got is a violent creature, is a heartless creature, is in human form, is came to this population and is the God of the Jews and is the God of this. In the next move, the book immediately locates the realm of this being. The realm of this being is not Judea or Jerusalem or Greece or the Scandinavian world. This realm is sketched in the next line when it says, Rabbil Alameen, Lord and Sustainer of all the worlds. But that line says more than just the jurisdiction of that divine power, that divine eternal deity. It says more. It stipulates that it is a jurisdiction, but it is also an active ground, it is an active area of operations of that supreme being. So, when we see the word Rabb, it translates as somebody that is actively in the process of cultivating and nurturing and growing and improving and uplifting. Because the word Rabb is used with respect to children. When we say in Arabic, you have rubbed, you have rabba, you have done rub to a person, it means you have raised them, you have brought them up. And so in the second line of our Fatiha, it stipulates that this divine supreme being, he is the Rabb of all the worlds. And I said in the previous video, the word worlds can be interpreted in two ways. Number one, it could be geographically. Worlds could be geographically or cosmic, in a cosmic sense, where there are worlds beyond planet Earth, worlds beyond the solar system, worlds beyond our galaxy, in fact, different galaxies. So there is one supreme being that is an overlord of all the worlds. Those worlds that you see on Star Trek and on Battlestar and on Star Wars, those worlds, if you can imagine any other world out there, then that supreme being has jurisdiction and is very much in control wherever those worlds are. In a nurturing way, not in a, because it says Rabb, in a nurturing and sustaining and developmental way, he takes care of all the worlds, whether it is cosmic, but also the word worlds could also refer to populations or sections of the human species. And so the human worlds are also implicit in this verse, because the ancient Arabs would use the word alam to refer to different countries also. And so you can localize the term Rabbil Alameen to also stipulate various populations on this planet. So whether you are speaking about the population in the east, the population in the west, the Chinese world, the Eastern world, the third world, the first world, in whichever way you can divide humanity and use the word worlds to reflect those different aspects of humanity. So you then have to settle on the understanding that that supreme being is the Rabb, is the sustainer, is the nurturer, is the Lord of all of these worlds also. That is Rabbil Alameen. Then in the next line, an important next move is to highlight the most important, probably for us, feature of that divine essence. Because once we acknowledge the divine essence, once we know the jurisdiction of the divine essence, we now want to learn about his nature. Is his nature kind or is his nature harsh? And the next line states that his nature is not harsh. His nature is essentially not harsh, Because in the next line it says, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, possessor of all grace, yet compassionate. Now let me speak to you about the word Ar-Rahman, because this is a powerful word. This is a word that cannot be attributed to any human being. We cannot call a human being Ar-Rahman. The ancient Arabs would refer to Ar-Rahman instead of Allah often when they referred to the real benevolence. And in ancient times, in times of paganism, the God or the deity would be seen as the one who opens up fortune, who opens up opportunities. And if you think about life in the wilderness, life at the mercy of all the elements of nature, not an artificially created life as we experience, but life when you are on your own, out there, off the grid, living from the earth, then you are dependent on what the earth presents to you. You are dependent on the availability of food. You are dependent on the kindness of the weather. You are dependent on whether the soil will grow crops for you. And so your dependency is on a benevolent earth. You hope for benevolence from the earth, from the sky, for rain to come, for extreme weather to be controlled. And the ancient pagans or the early human beings, when they started acknowledging the existence of a supreme deity, or even when they became idolatrous and they would associate wrongful understandings of the deity, they would still refer to it as Ar-Rahman, the one who creates mercy, the one who creates the situation where we get benefit, where we benefit, the one who is allowing the earth to present its gifts in terms of its bounties. Right? And so the word Ar-Rahman means the one that is the dispenser of all bounties, the one that can retain or offer, that can restrain or can open up the bounties of the universe or of the earth or wherever we are. And even today, as we live in our modern society, we're still dependent on a lot of fortune or good bounty in our daily lives. And if you're a man or a woman who works for yourself, you are so much more aware of what I'm speaking about. You're working for the state, you're working for a boss. I don't think you really, you transfer that gratitude to your boss because you mistakenly identify your boss as the dispenser of bounties, the dispenser of what the Qur'an refers to as rizq or fortune. But fortune really, bounty really, the originator is nature. And the real controller of nature, the real master of nature is that supreme being, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahman. And so, in this line it says, Ar-Rahman, He is the holder of all bounties, the dispenser of all fortune. But then in the very next word, it qualifies that. So, notwithstanding being in such a powerful position, notwithstanding being the one who owns you, who owns your fortune, who owns the mercy or the way how much you will attain in this world. The very next word says Ar-Rahim. So even though He possesses all of the bounties, and I've used the word grace, all grace, He remains compassionate. And so that really, my dear friends, my good brothers and sisters, introduces the kind Lord, the merciful, supreme Lord to us in the first 3 lines here. All praise be due to God, Lord and sustainer of all worlds, possessor of all grace, yet compassionate. But then in the next line, we see the other side of this Supreme Being. Because, you see, the first few lines introduce a God that contrasts it from the Jewish God, Jehovah, which is a God that is a tribal God, a God that is there for the Jewish people. It goes against the idea of the Jesus God, the God that is that is there for some of the people, that is there for humanity, that is there for only that is not limitless in his power. Because certainly the word Jesus militates, the idea of a Jesus God militates against Rabbil Alameen, the Lord of all the worlds. And then, of course, the next line, Maliki Yawmiddin, further distinguishes this Supreme Being from the Jesus God. When it says, Maliki Yawmiddin, the one who sits in judgment. But not just the one who sits in judgment, because Maliki Yawmiddin Malik means be in possession of, brandishing it, wielding it. So God, in this final verse of the first block that I'm speaking about here, tells you that although I am merciful, although I am the Lord, the sustainer, the kind one, I hold this judgment day over your head. I hold this judgment day, this reckoning over each of your heads. And that's a very important thing, because although it is scary, it's going to let, I can see the atheist saying, now look at this. This is a judgmental God. No. The first three lines have been lines of mercy and benevolence. Now in the final of these three verses, it has to stipulate, lay down the law that there is accountability. Because God is kind and God is compassionate, but God will not allow you not to be kind and compassionate. You have the obligation of, as they say, paying forward that kindness and compassion. When you receive kindness and compassion from your Lord and your Creator and from nature, of which God is the controller and the owner of, you need to pay that kindness and compassion forward, or that day of reckoning is on you. And so in the first 4 lines, the first 3 verses there, what I've shown you is the introduction to God. Al-Fatiha, in its first move, it introduces the divine in an absolutely comprehensive way. We see the divine in his jurisdiction. We see the divine in his power. We see the divine in his essence as being a kind and merciful divine. And we see the divine in his insistence on reckoning, on accountability, on imposing and calling for and demanding kindness, justice, mercy from you, his subjects. Now the next phase of Surah Fatiha, once we have established God and distinguished him from all the false attributes, the angry God of the Old Testament, the never ever forgiving God of the New Testament, or from Christianity, who demands no code of conduct, who only demands a verbal or a mental commitment. This God demands a code of conduct, because implicit in the idea of reckoning is the idea of a standard of code of conduct. Because there can be no judgment, there can be no reckoning when the required behavior is simply an utterance of a formula. So this God is a God of kindness, mercy, transcending all space and time, throughout jurisdiction, throughout the universe, who wields a reckoning over all those who have voluntary or who have discretion on their own behavior. Right. So the next two lines, or the next verse, verse 4, is really juxtaposing us. It is introducing God, and now it is locating the human being in juxtaposition with the Supreme. And really, all I can say is verse 4 is a declaration of freedom. Verse 4 is the declaration of the freedom of man and woman. Verse 4 of Surah Fatiha guarantees freedom. It enshrines freedom for humanity. Implicit in the words, Iyyaka na'budu, to you and only you we remain devoted. Because the you and only you is a very, very profound sentence that excludes devotion to any other. You see, devotion is to that supreme divine only. And your devotion, if it is misplaced, it would be mistaken. And that is important as to juxtapose us. We are free from any form of enslavement, from any form of devotion to any other being except the one supreme divine authority. So verse 4 is the charter of human freedom. It actually enshrines freedom in the Qur'an. Freedom of devotion. We are devoted to none other but God. We are enslaved by none other but God. We are captured by none other than God. We are beholden to none other but God. It is a statement of freedom. To you and only you we remain devoted. And then the next line in that verse, and from you and only you we seek support. It renders all other powers mute. The next line renders any other power mute. When you say Iyyaka na'budu, you disable any other claimant to authority, any other claimant to divinity. And when you say, and from you and only you we seek support, you disable any other power. You disable any other pretender to power, whether it's a sheikh, a maulana, an employer, a billionaire, a government, a state. The United Nations, you disable all of their power when you read this verse 4. Verse 4 is a declaration of universal freedom. We cannot be free without this verse, and this verse is enshrined in the first chapter of the Holy Quran. Then the last three verses then is a prayer, and it elucidates the further aspirations and hopes of humanity. It gives us a mission. It gives us a purpose. So first section introduces the divine, allows us to see his attributes. Verse 2 juxtaposes us with respect to the divine and is a declaration of the freedom of man and woman. And then 5, 6, and 7 is the mission, is the purpose. The purpose, you are given your purpose in verses 5, 6, and 7. And the purpose comes in the form of a prayer. It comes in the form of beseeching or a prayer of enablement. Enable us to do this. Enable us to do the following. And the enablement that we are calling for is guide us towards the even path. So the path that is even, the path that is not crooked, the path that is just, the path that is fair, the path that is that is correct, but more so, more than that, it qualifies the path. Guide us to the even path. The even path could be misinterpreted. The deconstructionist, the postmodernist will come and say, but any path can be even. No, in the next line, it actually qualifies what is the even path. The path of those who reap benefit from you. Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim. The path of those who absorbs the concept of the divine and benefits from that concept. The path of those who embraces the concept of there being a supreme being and benefits from that concept, and makes that concept a force for good, a force for greatness, a cause or a source of progression. That is the right path. Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim. The path that carries blessings from God. And of course, we know when we speak about benefiting from God, we speak about benefiting from His commands, benefiting from His instructions. And that verse there, implicit in that verse, when Allah says Sirat al-ladhina an'amta alayhim, it really means those who take the book, the precepts, the teachings, the guidelines, the book, the text as revealed, and commits to those hudud, to those guidelines, to those ayat, and uses those guidelines as a source or source code. And then also, very, very importantly, it distinguishes the path that is correct from the path of those غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, not the path of those who incur anger. Al-Maghdub. Now, Al-Maghdub, people mistranslate this as the anger of God. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوب. No, it just simply says Al-Maghdub are any people who incur anger on this planet. And people who incur anger are people who do injustice, people who act in a mischievous way, people who renege on their agreements, people who act in a obnoxious way, people who are ugly, violent, with no cause to others. Those are the people who incur anger. Those are the people who are hated. The hated people here in this next line, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوب, do not, we are asking God here in this chapter, in this particular verse, show us the path of those who do not end up suffering the anger and the hatred of others. And those would be the oppressors, the elite. And we are asked to show us a path other than the path of the exploitative elite, the oppressors, the usurpers, the tyrants, or those who are indifferent to oppression, because they also raise the anger of people. I live in a country where we have a government who is not necessarily a tyrannical government, but they are inept, incompetent, and unable to serve the needs of the people, and therefore they suffer that same anger and that same hatred that a violent and cruel government would suffer because of their ineptitude, because of their greed, because of their non-violent crime. Not saying that they have. So that is غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوب. Put us not on the path of those who suffer hatred of the masses. وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, nor of those, and this is the beautiful last words, وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, nor of the lost. Because not all people are oppressors, not all people are tyrants, not all people are criminals. Many people are in fact duped by the criminals, duped by the oppressors, to accept their slavery, to accept the lies. You know, if I look around me, I look at Muslim people, Christian people, Jewish people, atheist people, I see them duped. I don't see evil people, I see lost people, my dear friends. And so this final word in this beautiful opening 7 phrases or verses states that keep us away from the path of the lost, those gullible idiots that fall in line, those gullible idiots that accept the wrong instructions, the false authority of those who invoke anger. Let us not be of them. And we all recite these 7 verses every single day. And these verses are the verses that sets the scene, not only for the divine, it not only sets the scene for who the divine is, it sets the scene for who we are, a free people, a people that depend only on one supreme power, and a people with a mission to pursue the right path and to shun and to discard the path of those who invoke anger, who incur anger, hatred of people, and nor of those who are lost in accepting lies, living a lie and accepting a lie and embracing a lie. And so we ask Allah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين والحمد لله رب العالمين.